And sure, let's take it away. Okay. Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome. My name is Bill Cartolopoulos. This is the 396th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. That's a pretty incredible number, especially when we consider what this event is. I just want to say a couple words at the beginning about the symposium. The symposium was founded in 2012 by Ben Catchor. It's an outgrowth of the Occupy movement that was happening at that time. There was an idea to try and generate projects under a kind of vague umbrella of the idea of an Occupy university to sort of take information and education outside of the kind of walled tower of the academy and make it available freely. And so Ben just started this weekly meeting, and that since then has kind of evolved on its own to being a free public weekly speaker series where we bring people in to talk about comics, visual narrative, and other kinds of text, image works. As I said, my name is Bill Cartolopoulos. I've been honored for the last few semesters to co-curate this series along with Ben Catchor, Austin English, and Lily Carre. And this is our second meeting of the year, of the academic year, I should say, our second meeting of the fall season. It's the first one that I'm hosting this season. And I just wanted to say how excited I am for tonight's event. I think I'm maybe just excited to be here as an audience member for this event. I think as anyone who's researched any area of comics history knows, you have to do a lot of self-education and try and piece things together based on fragmentary information. And certainly the first time I heard of tonight's speaker, I think probably would have been looking at the cover of the women who contributed to It Ain't Me, Babe, the very first underground comic book, really, written and drawn entirely by women. And several of the contributors were together in a group, but a couple of people sent in their own pictures. And one of them was tonight's speaker, Nancy Burton, except her name was given as Hurricane Nancy, just Hurricane Nancy. That was the entire name that was given there. And then I think there might have been a picture of her as well in a picture of the Women's Comic Collective, and there was another picture of Hurricane Nancy. So it just seemed like this very mysterious figure who had this name, like she was from the Wild West, and I didn't really know a lot about her, but it was so intriguing. Who is this Hurricane Nancy? What is the legend of Hurricane Nancy? And at the same time, or maybe later, I guess it would have been later. I was researching comics in the East Village Other, and I found this really early one that I had never seen before, I hadn't heard a lot about, called Gentle, or maybe had never heard of, I don't remember, called Gentle's Trip Out, by someone who just signed their work Panzika, and I'm like, well, how come people don't talk about this very early, very interesting looking, underground newspaper comic, and who the heck is Panzika? And so, and to me, those were like two separate questions, but actually it turns out they're the same question, because Panzika was Hurricane Nancy, who's also Nancy Burton, someone who's gone by many names, who's tonight's speaker. And one of the reasons why I know these things, in part, is because, certainly we've been lucky to have a lot of good archival books coming out over the last, 15 years or so, things like the Complete Women's Comics and the Complete Zap and the Complete Tits and Clips and many others. But also when the Complete Women's Comics came out in particular, tonight's moderator, Alex Dueben, undertook a really nice series of interviews for the Comics Journal. He did kind of an oral history of women's comics, including some voices from artists who we haven't heard a lot from before, always, including, I would say, Nancy Burton. And not only that, Alex did us the service of actually, like a good journalist, following up, doing follow-up interviews, learning more, so suddenly, through Alex's interviews, we've been very fortunate, I think, to learn things that we didn't know about some really important artists, and in particular, Nancy Burton. And all of that is to say, as prelude, well, I shouldn't say it's all as prelude, but that the reason why we're here this year today is because recently Fantagraphics Underground has published Hurricane Nancy, a collection of comics and artwork by Nancy Burton that has been edited by Alex and includes an introduction and an interview by Alex that's very revealing. So without any further ado, first of all, please join me in welcoming Nancy Burton and Alex Dueben here tonight. And then I'm happy to turn the microphone over to Alex so that he can take it from here. And as I said, I'll run the, oh no, right, we're doing the slides with your browser. Never mind, forget it, I said anything, I got confused. Okay, take it away. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Nancy, both of you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill, that for the very kind introduction. But anyway, we're kind of going to give a brief description of kind of Nancy's life and work, and it's not quite what you get from the book. You have to go and pay $30 to find out all that, but it'll give you a sense of kind of hopefully who she is and the kind of work she's produced, and give you a sense of kind of this period of the underground. Because I mean, not to get ahead of things, but one of the reasons why I did sort of that large oral history project of the Women's Comics Collective was simply because at the time I didn't really know much about underground comics at all. I knew Trina and Trina Robbins and had interviewed her and talked to a few other people, but I didn't really know anything. So it was kind of me getting an education through pitching someone to pay me to get an education, which is one of the great things you can do as a journalist sometimes. But I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Okay. So we'll do this, but we will start with, I mean, Nancy, you were living in New York and you picked up a copy of the East Village Other.
Yeah, I was living in the East Village, which was filled with all sorts of characters. It was wonderful. You could get cheap rent there. And there were a lot of artists, and there were a lot of immigrants, and there were a lot of people. And walk-up apartments and bathtubs in your kitchen. And so I started to reach out into the community and said, okay, I always wanted to do cartoons. So you have this newspaper, the East Village Other. I'm sure they'll take what I do. And I had a long history as a hippie, etc. So I started Gentle's Trip Out, and I walked over with, you know, with the first one into the newspaper office. Oh, sure, we'll publish it. You know, we never spoke of money. I never got paid. I never even thought that that art and money had some association. Silly me. And so they started publishing Gentle Strip Out, and I would bring it and they would publish it. Wonderful people at the East Village Other. And you know, and then in the end, a new editor came in and I was fired. I mean, he just told me we weren't going to do it anymore. And the last picture, the last cartoon, which we don't have up here, this is, I think, the first one. It just ends with a blank. The sheet is cut off because that was it. Next, you, as a creator, you always have to think next. It's interesting. Okay, so that's my story of the East Village Other.
Well, and this is a strip that Patrick Rosenkrantz described as a spacey Aubrey Beardsley style comic, which you can kind of get it's kind of hard to read in isolation if you're only just picking up one of them. But I think that this one kind of gives a sense of that. But it also gives a sense that, I mean, you were I mean, this is your first comic and you're just doing this. There was a narrative to it.
Oh, there was a whole story, and it was right, it's like some of us are storytellers, some like you are wordsmiths. I see pictures, I think in pictures a lot, and then this was the perfect genre for me, and it was totally mine. I said, oh my God, I can do anything I want. It was very, very exciting for me to start this. And then have somebody say, oh yeah, we'll publish it. No problem.
And that was, you just went over and they said yes, and you just kept showing up every now and then with a new page.
Yeah, until the new editor came in and said, we don't want to publish this anymore. And I had one at home that I was working on, which I never finished, which is actually in this book. A lot of my work I lost because I didn't put value on it. And so there it is. Yeah. Life was very simple.
Bill, did you want to?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. I was kind of wondering because I mean, one of the things that's really striking to me about this situation of Gentle's trip out in the East Village Other is that there was almost no model for anything like this. I think the only comic that had been in the East Village Other before Gentle's trip out was Captain High by Bill Beckman. Did you see Captain High, and did that make you think, oh, I can do a comic strip for this paper? Or was it just maybe you saw Evo and you thought that was a place that would take a comic strip?
The last thing, I just thought this would be a great place and they would take a comic strip and I was going to do a comic strip because these pictures and ideas are developing, and so I'll just do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and and around the same time, you also contributed to Gothic Blimp Works, which was sort of a sister publication to the East Village Other that was all comics. And you did 4 comics for them.
Yeah, busy boxes. And you can see, this
This
is
is
an
only
old,
half a page because I had to cut it off. It's
it's
hard to get that.
fine, if you look at it, you can see where it's orange, that's where there was Scotch tape for printing and all sorts of, all this stuff is in the, Billy Ireland, cartoon library and museum at the University of Ohio because it was all falling apart. But yeah. So yeah, I love Gothic Glimpse Works. And they just, again, just published it. Never spoke of money. What a concept. They knew I was just an old hippie. I mean, I wasn't that old. I mean, in comparison. But yeah. I just was.
Well, and here too, you were also always thinking about narrative. I mean, everyone kind of bleeds into the other, and you have this overarching story, even though they were coming out however far apart from each other.
Yeah. There was always a story.
Well, and it's
So,
just such an interesting, and again, I mean, like Bill said, there wasn't quite a model for this. I mean, people weren't necessarily working this way.
no, I'm sure the guys who were making cave paintings after the after the hunt, there wasn't a model for that either. They eat their meat and go up to the wall and start painting or start making pictures of what they experienced. And I think it's more in that line, comics to me is in that very old line of people who are telling a story with pictures. You know, and it's their personal story. Wow.
Now I picked this one. I just wanted to pick a random image, but I picked it for a couple of reasons. One, I think I can kind of see the through line between this, which is, I want to say 67 or 68,
Yeah.
and the work you do more recently. I can kind of see a clear through line there.
Thank you. Yeah. I like the one sheet and something that flows, and you look at it and you get the concepts, whatever you bring to it. I mean, any art is something you have to look at, and the person who's looking is contributing. You know, I don't tell somebody what they should think or what they should feel or what they should see. You just put it out there. So this was one, yeah, this was later than Gentle Strip Out.
Well, and I guess one of the things people will know if they read the interviews, but once we got to know each other and you started telling stories, that you kind of had this life as like the Zelig of the late 1960s. You would suddenly mention something and you would go, oh, and I was at the Monterey Pop Festival. And I would kind of be, making notes about what you just said and go, wait, hold on, what? And you would go, oh, I was holding a camera in the press box. And then you start telling, so yes, that you have a lot of it. You were very busy during this time, not just drawing, but traveling around and being a lot, living.
Absolutely. I was looking for spiritual awareness. And you can see from this picture that that's what I was doing. I mean, there was always that looking for, well, what is life? What am I supposed to be doing? What's going on here? Why am I on planet Earth? And I wasn't, even my drugs, marijuana, LSD, all that stuff, was for looking for spiritual enlightenment, like peyote, and it was not for some physical sensation, which is, whatever. I mean, we all have every one of us is different, and all our searches are different. But I love people who are searching, and of course, searching for spiritual awareness and how they can help and better the lives of themselves and others. Simple.
Now, I did want to include this image just sort of as we talk, in part because it is the cover of the book.
That's
Which is
Gary Gruel. I'm going to interrupt you. I have
Okay.
to say, this is like you picked a very conservative, as conservative picture. And when you sent the work up to Gary, and he put this on the cover, his whole team designed the book, did all the work on the book. The book is absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely. And that's his Fantagraphics team's work. I mean, masters of books. And he, you asked him, well, why did you put that on the cover? Very diffidently, Alex, I think.
I did not. I thought about asking. I caught myself knowing that my first reaction to things is usually something I should keep to myself.
Well,
I'm a writer. I need at least 6 drafts to sound intelligent. But
thank you, Alex. Not my experience with you. I think you're a genius, but you know how I feel. And so Gary, however he put it out, he said, this will sell books. I sell books. What a concept. Selling this art. Anyway,
But I bring it up because one, I think it's one of the best images of your early period that you did. And it's one that Helen Chazen, when she reviewed the book in the Comics Journal, kind of singled out as what she thought was one of the best also. And she spoke specifically about how it embodies a lot of what you how you work, that it's very physical for all. I mean, you were talking about spirituality and transformation. There's very much a physicality to the work.
I agree. But you know, each one of us spirits has a body, and the body has a lot of sensation. And the body also has lots of little traps that one can fall into. But I love this picture. I had so much fun doing it.
And was this around the time you were pregnant with one of your sons?
No, I
No?
think this is earlier.
This
I
is
think
early.
this is earlier in the 60s. You know, but I really always had attention on pregnant and female things in my work. I never studied why that was. I just rode that horse. If somebody gives you a horse and you can ride it, go, baby, go.
You never looked the gift horse in the mouth.
No,
Yes.
you never look. You know, especially on a creative line. You know, like which in the end is the spiritual line.
Well, and I mean, when we've talked, you talked about not meeting other cartoonists, which wasn't some sort of intentional plan on your part. It just is how it worked out.
It's just how it worked out. I just, you know, I'm a person who doesn't have a television in her house. I mean, I used to watch a bit and movies and series, and then one day, about 4 years ago, I went, I'm getting too much electronics and other people's pictures from these electronic things. So for me, just to create, even though, you know, it's not, it is what it is. I think moving that off the line, it's not that I don't listen or watch something very, you know, on YouTube or something very fast, but one's own pictures and one's own creations are interesting. They're freeing. That's the thing. They are freeing. We are creators. We're not all the same. I mean, we have similarities, but we're not all the same. Like all of us who are in this room, in this Zoom room, every one of us has our own universe. So this came out of my universe. I went, wow, that's weird, but that's where it came from.
So how did Trina Robbins first reach out to you about It Ain't Me, Babe? This would have been about 1970, 69, 70.
That's when she found me. She had found Gentle's Trip Out earlier and considered it was the first female underground, that Hurricane Nancy or Banzica or whoever was the first female underground cartoonist. And then she found me because she found me and she came and I had a portfolio and I gave her a picture, which is probably in her own archives or whatever, and it is the centerfold of It Ain't Me, Babe. And we had instant love for each other. I mean, there was a real, well-organized, intelligent, you know, with a purpose person, just amazing woman. Yeah. So
And-
she found me.
And then she found you again years later.
Years later.
How did that, was that just when she was putting together the women's comics collection, or?
She probably had my email or traced me down or asked somebody. She had so many people she was communicated with. She could find anybody if she wanted to. I mean, this is what I mean. That is a real executive, as well as a wonderful artist and a wonderful person. But yeah, so she found me and she asked me, and of course.
Because you stopped making comics or any art for a
In
long time.
1971, I stopped.
Yeah.
And I started the next phase of my life, which was very interesting, which I'm not, you know, but basically got into helping others, especially artists and people with education, becoming more able, getting off drugs, you know, and a lot of help to others. And I just loved it. And then, you know how I got back. Shall I tell that story? To
Why don't you
making
tell?
pictures? Okay,
Tell the story, yes.
I'll tell the story. So, was it about 15 years ago? I got breast cancer, you know, and now I was helping others and I was doing things that I really got great satisfaction from, because when you see somebody get better, there's nothing better. But I got breast cancer, and then I had to really look at myself. Just me. Aside from all the wonderful things I was doing for others. And I went, why do I want to live? What is my personal purpose? And I decided start making pictures again. So I started pictures, gave everything to the doctors, to this, to that, and never stopped from that point on. I mean, I have in this series, I have 501 pictures. Yeah. From that
And-
period.
And you just started posting them online.
Yeah, I know. A lot of them are on Instagram. I was posted, a friend of mine, a couple of friends posted things on Facebook, but what happened is I was censored on Facebook. It was not up to community standards. And recently I was censored on Instagram, but that one I was able to handle. Funny. I have no idea why. But anyway, so I just started and I kept looking, where is the magazine? Where is the newspaper that's going to take my weekly cartoon? Well, I haven't found it yet, but I keep making the work. And I
Well,
keep help, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is around the time we first met. Because as Bill noted, in, I want to say it was 2016, Fantagraphics published the complete women's comics, which included It Ain't Me, Babe. And so Dan Nadell and Tim Hodler, who were editing the Comics Journal at the time, I pitched them this sort of group interview with a few of the people involved. And I forget the timeline exactly, but the book was delayed a couple times. And so it would get delayed 6 months, and I would go, I should talk to a few more people. And so this is how it became. 25 people, I think, ended up in the final published interview. And then there were probably half a dozen others who couldn't, or we talked, but it didn't, for various reasons. But as I told Nancy, and I know you didn't quite believe this when I told you this, but one of the most people would ask, so who else are you talking to? And when I said, oh, I talked to Hurricane Nancy, almost everyone said, oh my God, what is she like? Because none of them had ever met you. And they were all very curious.
Isn't that funny? Oh, that's so funny, because here I am, this noisy New York Jewish, very overt person, but I was not in that group. I was not going to meetings or doing something with that group. So, ooh, what is Nancy gonna look at me? Am I an introvert? I mean, I can be if you say something nasty to me and I don't know how to respond. But I'm just overt as hell. So, as you know, because we worked together, we had so much fun.
We did. And of course, at the time, I didn't really know you. I think we had one phone conversation just for that project. But so I didn't really have much to offer them as far as what you were like. But now, of course, I could tell them a story. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the book, I don't know what you want to say about the book. I mean, the book kind of came about, and I think it kind of worked because you have this perspective of the book is mine, which I think is very generous of you.
But it's true. This is Alex's book. I mean, I wouldn't have a book. I didn't even have a place where I published. And where I did, I got censored. But Alex was writing a book, and he's a brilliant writer. And if you read, I just reread what he wrote, the interview and how he put it together. It's magnificent. Unfortunately, I win. Yeah, that was me. What an asshole. But whatever. I mean, not that I wasn't presented as an asshole, but sometimes when you look, when a person really tells the story of the good things the person has done and the bad things the person has done, and just tells the story of it in sequence, you got to take some kind of responsibility for some of the bad things you did. And there you go. But we talked and talked and talked and talked. And he asked question. He knew me better than my husband, who was the last and the really nice, the real husband.
I don't know about that one, but I mean, I will just say I think
I'm joking, but
I know. But I guess, I mean, I kind of started writing on the internet in the aughts, and there were a lot of, this is sort of at the time where people were sort of leaning into having a personality and having a brand, which I always kind of disliked on a lot of levels. Like if I'm reading an interview or a piece of criticism, it shouldn't be all about the writer. So I've always kind of felt with interviews that for the most part, I should be more invisible. That kind of, I should let the person come through. It should be a chance to let the art be seen and let people think about or rethink what they've seen or how to understand it. So I guess kind of our relationship in doing the book worked because I just wanted Nancy to be at the center of it all, and she just kind of would always defer to me. And I just wanted her to be at the center and be happy with it. So
I was thrilled. This is Alex's book, and he interviewed me and took, I was very honest about my life and the influences. You have wonderful questions, great interest level, and you didn't feel like anything that you had done was being judged. And very wonderful. Great. I mean, I would have told him anything. And I did. Yeah.
but I guess one of the things I really admire about Nancy is kind of that perspective, this distance she has about her work and her life, and just, I mean, as you mentioned, you've made over 500 drawings you've done sort of just in the past, 15 years, and you essentially make one, and whether you think this is the best thing you've done or whether you're like, I'm having second thoughts on it, you put it aside and you move on to the next thing. I mean, you kind of, that's how you operate in a way, and I kind of admire that sort of distance from the work.
Thank you. Yeah, I never destroy a piece of work. I always finish what I started, and sometimes I like them and sometimes I don't. But it's a continuous flow of pictures and ideas, and somebody else likes them or don't. I mean, I've had people look at it and go, if they say, what do you do when, as an art, and I would show them the pictures on Instagram and they go, well, that's not my style. I'm going, fuck you. I don't say that. I would never say that to an artist. It's like, just look at it and see if you can find something in it, or say, thank you for showing me. It's not my style. Style, all of it is developed and created by the creator. So it was funny when I had just a couple of people, and it was like, oh my God, get a life, start creating. Not everybody is Michelangelo. I mean, there you go. Or Botticelli. I would love to be those guys, but I'm not.
Bill, do you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, well actually a couple of things. Hi Nancy, a couple of things that you said kind of raised a couple of questions for me. You mentioned that you're from New York. I mean, when you were in the East Village, I guess you were. Were you in New York born and raised, as opposed to all the people who came to New York because it was supposed to be a cool place?
I'm a born and raised New Yorker,
Mhm.
raised in Far Rockaway, the last stop on the A train, and in a kind of very mixed working class, just a mixed neighborhood, which I love. Don't put me in a gated community. I mean, please. So, we lived in apartments, we played outside, we rode bicycles, we went into people's apartments, you could hear other people's toilets flushing. I mean, yeah. So that's where I was raised, and of course I came from a family that loved the arts. So I went to opera, I went to concerts, I went to Broadway shows, I went to
Museums, I bet.
museums. Oh my God. We are so rich in New York. It's incredible. So rich. And then I discovered rock and roll, and Alan Freed, and you got to watch a movie and you had a concert. And the first man I ever fell in love with was Chuck Berry. And he was you have to look him up, but he was a great musician. And he would play the show between the movie. And you were only charged for a movie, for God's sakes. Alan Freed was a genius. I mean, whatever else people have and slip on a slippery slope, he was a genius.
And one other question I wanted to ask is, were you much of a comics reader growing up, either newspaper comics or comic books?
No, I read the Sunday papers, but at my friend Angela Barisano's house, because my family wasn't big comic people, and I read some comics, but no, I wasn't a big comic reader. I was more go to the museum, go to the beach, walk on the boardwalk, I like to play with dolls and play with friends and make up fantasies. I like the communication with another person a lot. If you heard that in the background, that was thunder.
Well, people are actually asking questions in the
Yeah, I was gonna
chat.
ask, you want me to start taking some of those questions from the chat too?
Sure, I can read them or you can read it, whatever.
Sure, yeah, why don't you start with Generosa's question, Alex, since he said.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Nancy, curious if your process or preferred creative tools changed in any major way from when you first began making comics to when you started back up again decades later.
Yes. I used to have those India ink pens that you filled up and they had India ink and everything. Now I use pencil and roller balls and these great, black pens, and some German stuff, that's water-based, but, basically a regular good black ballpoint pen works great. So yeah, I changed from a more artsy, esoteric pen to a artsy, a pen that's not artsy, but I made artsy. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyway, question from Austin, who was here, even though I owe him edits. And he's probably
Hi,
gonna
Austin.
email and complain about it after, but not until after the conversation. Thank you. Nancy, I find your comics incredible, and I'm glad the new book exists. And I'm curious what you said about not knowing the wider community of cartoonists during the underground era so well. Do artists in your experience struggle with the choice to be known within a community or to instead properly focus on their work? Is that a choice you had to consider? Because in underground comics, I often see cartoonists who were clearly on the scene, but maybe less focused on developing as powerful a style as you did and continue to do.
As I said earlier, every person is a different person. What works for one may not work for another person. I was very good at, okay, I'm home, I'm working, and then I would have people come and visit me, but I had poets and musicians and different kinds of people. I didn't seek out the comic community because I didn't know I was in it. I didn't characterize now I'm very careful to say I am a cartoonist because that's what I am. I mean, that's the genre that it is. These are cartoons. But, so I didn't specifically seek that out. And more was, let's go and listen to the Velvet Underground. Yeah, so I didn't seek out that group at all. I have no idea why. I mean, it's actually a mystery to me, but No, I didn't. Is there more to that question?
Oh, okay. Well, the second part was kind of, do artists, in your experience, struggle to be known within a community or properly focus on their work to develop a style?
Okay. That's thunder. Um, I think people have to produce. It's simple as that. If you want a product, you have to produce. You can't just talk about it. So I know how many hours that I have to put in to make one drawing. How long, Alex, did you take to write that book or make that interview perfect? I mean, so I think it's both ways. But many artists like to gather together, like have a cup of coffee and meet each other in the same group. And I never sought out the kind of group. It's not like I didn't have a lot of friends, but I wasn't seeking that out. And I really sought my solitude but during that time, I produced. Production. You don't get a book unless you write it. You don't get a picture unless you do it. Can you hear the thunder?
Occasionally.
Okay,
It's not that bad.
all
Bill.
right.
Bill, save us from the thunder.
Oh, one question I wanted to ask, and this might have been in the introduction of the interview, and I don't remember, but did you go out to California at a certain point, or did you stay in New York?
I went to California.
Okay. And were you in
I,
the Bay Area, or did you kind of move?
yes,
Oh,
and then LA.
okay. Mhm.
Yeah, I went out to California to go to the Monterey Pop Festival. And I mean, I stood right at the stage holding this photographer, David Dalton's camera, and his girlfriend was there with him. And so I got into the press box, and I had my hands up on the stage when Jimi Hendrix burned his first guitar in the United States. And that was a thrill. What a thrill. Ah, what a great artist. So, yeah, so I went there to experience that bursting of life, of youth. Well, it's not just youth. You had Ravi Shankar and others. Just this burst of enormous talent and thinking and creation that was coming out that time. And I am very honored to have met people in that period and to have seen them until they kept shifting in bad drugs and doing whatever they could to get rid of. I don't want to get in anything like that, but I don't think some people can have free beings being so creative because they're going to change the way of life. And it threatens them. So I also saw the creators like Janis Joplin die. And well, we know there's a history of that happening. So did I answer that question?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess the only related question I wanted to ask is, You mentioned before that some of the people you knew were poets. Who were some of the poets who you knew?
Just people who wrote poetry. I don't even remember their names,
Okay.
but they'd come and I would be working, and I had this English guy who would always come up. And he would read his poetry. He would come up to the apartment that was in New York, but in LA and in San Francisco, it was more the musicians going to Mount Tamalpais and seeing Jim Morrison in a white t-shirt and jeans. Another great performer. Absolutely. You know. Yeah.
Thank you.
But Nancy, as you've sort of in recent years, as you've kind of become to seeing yourself as a cartoonist, I mean, what comics have you been reading? What sort of, how have you started to kind of make sense of this, even if it's through reading other work you're in or finding other people online?
You know, I look on Instagram and I follow these underground cartoonists. And I like to look at what they're drawing and doing. And then yeah, and sometimes I'll look up something that Stan Lee has done, or look at you know, work. I think cartoons are just fabulous. But you know, but it's basically what the young guys are doing right now that I follow on my Instagram. And it's very I find it just wonderful, very creative, very there's one he said he wanted to review my book, and I found out he lives in this area. So I invited him over, and I thought he was like an older Black man. And he came, and he's 23 years old. He puts out his own comics. His family's from the Congo, and he was born in Brooklyn. I mean, oh, and his name is Sam Edney. I mean, and I'm going, this is just amazing. 23 years old, and he's creating this stuff, and he has it organized, and he's print publishing. Amazing. So that's all I gotta say. I mean, that's not all I gotta say, but you know.
Any other questions from the audience? People who want to either type, you can either put them in the chat or raise your hand or.
And if we've answered all the questions, I mean, we're coming up close to the end of the hour. I mean, Alex, were there other questions that you wanted to make sure to ask while we have this time?
Well, I guess the main thing, I was kind of touching on it in sort of my last question, but I was just kind of curious about what Nancy makes of sort of the underground and what she was seeing from back then and how she sees comics now. I mean, when we were talking earlier, Nancy, I quoted, LP Hartley, "The past is a foreign country." And you kind of nodded in agreement. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah. I didn't fully I was listening to your question, but I didn't fully understand it. Could you ask me again?
Sure. I mean, talking about the underground and what comics were and what was happening then and sort of what you see around comics now.
Okay,
Or are you or are you like, I don't know, but
I see a great deal of creation in comics now. And some are really inspiring and some are really weird and I like them. What is wonderful is that these people who are doing that are cutting edge. They're away from what anybody else is doing. And a lot of them are wonderful artists. I mean, wonderful technicians. It's just great. So when I go on Instagram, that's the kind of thing I follow. I also follow sculpture from all over the world and painting and stuff like that because obviously I like art, you know, but these underground cartoonists or these new cartoonists are just, they're great. They're great and so talented.
well, Austin had a question. He wanted to know, as you were drawing on all kinds of cultural influences from that period, music, poetry, elsewhere, and you spoke about later on helping people recover from drug addiction. What was there a moment during the 60s where you felt a shift in how people, and maybe specifically people making art, were living?
Well, during the early 60s, I was doing a lot of traveling in Europe and then Morocco, and I went through into the Iron Curtain, a couple of Iron Curtain countries. You know, the backpackers, I didn't even have a backpack. I had a big straw bag and a poet husband at the time. And seeing art, like one of the main things that happened to me was in the Netherlands, seeing the art of Hieronymus Bosch and that period of art, and then going to the Prada and seeing, you know, heaven, purgatory, and hell, which is in the Prada or Prado or whatever. It's in Spain. Anyway, that's some of the greatest cartooning with the greatest tech expertise you're ever going to see anywhere on this planet. And the vision of hell. I mean, that's one of the greatest paintings for me on this planet. So traveling to me was very inspiring in terms of the people I met. I went through the Berlin Wall, which was interesting. It's the only time I've had a real gun pointed at me. I mean, this Russian soldier with a gun over a machine gun pointing at me, asking for my passport, you know, going from West Berlin to East Berlin. I mean, freedom and slavery. I mean, gray and colorful, creative and suppressed. I mean, it was like, if you ever wanted an example visually of freedom and slavery, that was it. I didn't get into the politics of it or anything. It was just completely, you couldn't miss it. Anyway, and this poor Russian soldier, he must have been 20 years old. Well, I wasn't that old, and pointing a machine gun at this American student on a train. Anyway, did I answer your question?
Well, I think Austin was just kind of curious, was there this kind of could you ever feel this shift? Or I guess maybe the question is better looking back on it. Could you see there was this point where things started to shift in terms of drugs, of how people and artists were living?
During that period with the summer of love and all of that, there was a shift. I mean, I shifted from and became a heavier druggie, and the LSD and everything that was being shipped in, I don't know from where, was cut with speed, which is why you had all of these overdoses and stuff like that. And I became stupider and stupider and less responsible during that period. But I wouldn't say I didn't actually stop producing. So what can I say? And when I stopped producing, it was in 1971, and it was totally by choice. And when I started producing again, it was totally by choice. So, but the shift was seeing this dream of a free, creative groups of people dancing and singing and having a great time and farming and doing what, people, everybody's different. They have lots of different interests, to being absolutely suppressed by drugs, by the drugs that were being shipped in. And then another thing that happened is I went to Timothy Leary's house, which was on the East Coast later. It was dirty. That's all I gotta say. It's like, this is not what I want. This is not, but then I guess he was part of the shift into the LSD, which was a drug of whatever they did. It was, I keep saying they, whatever was being done. And because I was participating in that, fully participating and not fighting back against it, I shifted into a stupid and less responsible person. Thank God I'm now 83 years old and I didn't drop dead from that shit. But yeah, there you go.
Well, Gary wanted to mention that Nancy was so utterly charming and gracious to work with on this book, just brimming with enthusiasm, and one of those authors who buoys a publisher's spirit.
Wow.
So
I just wanted to ask one other question of Nancy. I can't help but look at the tantalizing black and white artwork behind you. What is the artwork that you have on that table behind
It's
you?
about that is the last 4 drawings that I did. I figured, I'm in this room that my husband, who is now dead, used as a computer thing. I mean, it's like, so I said, I better bring some of my artwork in. Would you like to see them? I
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
stand up. I'm gonna stand up. It's the last 4 pieces. Actually, no, there's one outside that I'm still doing little details on, but okay, 4 or 5 pieces. Can you see it?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Oh, of course, I don't have my earplug in.
It's beautiful. Yes, yes, we can see it.
Okay, so that's one. That's number 499. Yeah, I was, okay. This is number 498. This is Where Do Babies Come From? And I have a little car in it. You know, the back of the car. And then this is 496. They all have names. Ooh. And this is 497. So that's your last month's.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And did you start using the name Hurricane Nancy when you started drawing again? Did you start using it again when you started drawing again?
Can I tell you the story connected with Hurricane Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. So Hurricane Jackson was a fighter who trained in Far Rockaway many years ago. And he was the first person who was extraordinary to me, who rose above and was different than anybody I had ever heard from. You know, I didn't know this thing about black and white and Jewish and Gentile and stuff deeply. I mean, I know it, but it's like, but anyway, because that being who worked and did what he did was just an inspiration and what he became. I mean, he made himself into a great fighter, and he trained on the boardwalk and he trained in Far Rockaway. So him being the first this lifetime person who really hit me as, you know, as an inspiration, like Gary Groff is an inspiration. I gotta say that. But so when I started looking, I wasn't looking that I live in Florida now with hurricanes. I was looking at hurricane. I want to be like Hurricane Jackson. So that's where hurricane came from, because he was the first this lifetime extraordinary being that I felt I had run into. That's the story. So, you know, we take our inspirations.
Well, Phoebe Glockner, the great Phoebe Glockner, has a question. She wants to know if you had a day job that you were doing when you were younger. And she wants to say that your new work is amazing, but she's curious what you were doing when you were younger.
Well, when I was younger, I went to Buffalo State Teachers College. So I taught for 6 months. I worked in the Department of Social Services for about 4. When I was back in New York, I worked a little bit in my friend John's a design company. That's the kind of stuff I did, but I wasn't very good at doing a day job. I don't know, I just somehow I survived without getting that involved in the workforce. And so, what can I say? But those are the things. I mean, my mother wanted me, to be a nice Jewish girl, but very, be very progressive and be very, good to others, uh, and, but you got to marry a doctor. So I met a dentist once and went out with him. What a schmuck. But anyway, so I didn't really, I'm not someone in that period who was in the workforce. I mean, when I was in Germany and backpacking, I call it backpacking, even though I was carrying a straw bag. I worked in Dr. Edgar's pudding pulver fabrican factory with a lot of Turkish women and people. And so I worked in a factory to continue to get a little money so I could continue to travel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And are there any other questions for Nancy? I guess the only other thing I'll ask is Alex, what was the what were some of the things that guided you when you were making decisions about what artwork to put in the book?
Well, I wanted to get as much of Nancy's early work in as possible. And I'm not going to say I could relate to this as something of a pack rat myself, but you did keep a lot of work. Despite, all the moves, not making art for decades, you did keep a lot of it.
It's true. Like 50 pieces went to the museum.
Yes,
I mean,
and you've since
and-
donated them to the Billy Ireland,
Yeah.
where they have a good home. But so there were things to track down. A gentle strip out here, a busy boxes there. The 2 pages from It Ain't Me, Babe, certain things like that. But I'm sure there's plenty of others floating around that we just never got to find. And then the more recent work, I think we just kind of went through it and thought about what we liked and what we responded to, and we would talk about it, and sometimes we didn't really have much to say about it, and we're like, yeah, let's drop this one. Yeah, it was a fairly organic process, to be honest.
And is all of the artwork in the book reproduced from original artwork? That was my question, but I wasn't sure.
I want to say yes. Gary and the team at Fantagraphics had to get a couple from collectors and whatnot. So I think a couple, and so I'm not sure. There might be 1 or 2 that are from just really good scans. But I think everything is from the originals.
Great. Well, thank you so much to both of you for being here, Nancy. I hope maybe now that your work is at the Billy Ireland, they'll be exhibited sooner rather than later, and maybe there will be a nice opening exhibition and some of that stuff can be seen in person. But in the meantime, we're very lucky to have this great book that Alex edited for Fantagraphics of Nancy's work. And so we can all learn a bit more about Hurricane Nancy. We can learn about Panzika, and we can all even learn about Nancy Burton, who really is the person who brought us here tonight. So thank you again to both of you for being here. Thanks for Fantagraphics to their help in setting this up. The one other thing I did want to note is just that we're meeting again next week. I'll be hosting next week's session again. Our guest will be the Portuguese comics critic Domingos Isabelinho. He'll talk about his new book, The Reading Gaze, which considers comics as through the lens of expanded field theory. And in particular, he's going to focus on some wonderful 13th century Spanish illuminated manuscripts that are the kind of ancient comic that like Nancy was talking about here.
Immediately,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, this beautiful book, Cantigas de Santa Maria, by Alfonso X, that he's going to be talking about a little bit next week. So, you know, again, like Nancy was saying, I mean, the visual storytelling is something that people have done throughout history in one form or another, including the kind of illuminated manuscript that I was just talking about. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Domingos. He's someone who's been writing a lot online for a long time, but who I've never heard speak myself. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you again, Alex, for your help with everything today. And finally, thank you, Nancy, for all of your work. And really just for being generous with your stories, both in the book and here tonight. I think one of the things that makes comics feel like a community is when we just get sometimes the opportunity to enjoy the things that come out of any community, including humans, just human stories from people who have had different life experiences or other perspectives than we have. And just thank you for sharing your art, and also thank you for sharing those stories from your life. We really appreciate it.
well, thank you so much. It was a complete pleasure. And can I put in a little thing like
Yes.
go on Instagram, because I'm always putting up, they tried to censor me, as I said, but they couldn't. And so every week or 2 weeks, there's a new picture on Instagram. And it's under Hurricane Nancy Art.
Yes. I'm gonna put that in the chat right now. The Instagram at Hurricane Nancy Art.
Yep.
And also I had posted this earlier, but I'm gonna post it again. This is the link to more information about the book on Fantagraphics website. And you can order it directly from there or from your preferred source of bound paper. Okay, thanks again, everyone. This will be recorded and it will be up on our YouTube channel within the next few days. And if you're interested in next week's talk, you can find the information to register, as always, on our website. Thanks again. Thank you, Alex and Nancy, and have a great night, everyone. Please be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So now what do we press, Alex?